Alright, so for today's presentation, I'm going to be going over 2D art, everything that I've learned about it over the semester, and kind of a brand overview of, as well as going over what I think makes 2D art really cool and really beautiful. And so we're going to be going over my favorite parts and kind of in-depth some of the awesome things that I've learned over the semester about the concept. So this is my final art presentation, and it's by me, Brady Maltby. And first off, one of the biggest things I learned about this semester was definitely 2D art, and 2D art is defined as art without depth, and so obviously it's two-dimensional, so it's usually on a level plane, and there are there are a ton of different forms of paintings, drawings, prints, and photography that we're going to be going over today. And we're going to talk about how art is one of the most diverse expressions of emotion and how each piece of art has a different story. In this presentation, I'll go over a couple of pieces that have some really cool stories behind them, including this piece. And it's a lot. There's just a lot whenever it comes to art, and you can really just express how you're feeling, what's going on, and even sometimes some crazy things that are going on in our world that need to be addressed and taken care of, such as some of the World War II photography and some of the other things we're going to talk about later in the presentation. The first thing we're going to talk about is going to be painting. So whenever you think of 2D art, you definitely think of paintings. Now there are some absolutely amazing paintings that have been created throughout the years and some absolute iconic ones. One of the biggest painters in the world, obviously, throughout time has been Pablo Picasso, and he would just create art that had really good feeling, and you could create emotion within the person viewing his art. And one big thing that a lot of people in art always say is it's not about the art itself, it's how the art makes you feel. And Pablo Picasso is one of those guys who really knew how to make people feel a certain way, even in something like as small as just this picture of a woman and the two eyes kind of staring at you. You can kind of just think that one's staring away, and everyone thinks something different probably about this painting, and it's just a consensus of how does it make you feel. And Pablo Picasso is one of the greatest ones to ever do it, and he makes really beautiful art. One of my personal favorites is sports art, and now sports art is really cool, and one of the guys that I actually ended up studying this semester was a guy named Leroy Neiman. Now, what's so cool about Leroy Neiman is not only was he one of the greatest sports artists of all time, as he would have paintings that ended up selling for up to about $10 million. So he ended up creating some absolute beautiful pieces, and people love him a lot just across the sports world. And one of the coolest things about this guy is just the fact that he also fought in World War II and fought some other big issues. So the guy was all over the place, and he did it all. He ended up going to art school pretty late. And one of the coolest things about him actually is that he ended up covering the Cardinals a lot. So he had guys like Mark McGwire and pictures like Mark McGwire, and he just had a lot of really, really cool things that he ended up doing. He was a really cool guy, and he ended up doing just a ton of crazy things, like going to the Olympics, going to the Super Bowl, going to the World Series. And he just ended up doing a lot of cool things that was really cool and inspiring at his time, as he just kind of did it all, and he fought for the United States. He did a lot of he was a really cool guy, and I definitely look up to Leroy Neiman. I think he's awesome. One of my favorite influential 2D arts has got to be the Leonardo da Vinci The Last Supper painting. This is just an absolute gem of a painting. As you look at the painting in the bottom right, you could actually end up seeing that one thing that Leonardo da Vinci ends up doing here is he ends up kind of showing off that this is a time of whenever Jesus ended up telling his disciples that one of them was going to betray him. You see a lot of just turmoil between all of the different disciples, and that they're going at it with each other, and they just can't believe that somebody is going to betray Jesus here. And it's just a really good painting. I mean, it goes over every little aspect. You can see them arguing, almost fighting, getting mad at Jesus, like no way it's going to happen. And so if you're a Christian and you really just have thought about this is exactly what I think happens in the Bible, and he just captured it perfectly. And obviously he's one of the greatest to ever do it, but it's a great painting that has a lot of depth behind it, and it tells a story behind it. And in my opinion, those are some of the best pieces of art, are the ones that end up telling a story. And I really love this one because it really just brings out all of the anger in this photo and all the frustration, and you can even see Jesus looking, in my opinion, a little bit sad here, which I kind of like the humility in the stuff that is drawn here. The next part of influential art that I wanted to end up covering and talking about has got to be this one by Michelangelo. It is just one of the most famous pieces of art ever created, and it's obviously the picture of God almost touching man and kind of the relationship between God and man even at the beginning. And so it's just one of those things that depicts perfectly just the way the Bible ends up talking about the relationship between God and humans, and just everything around it. There's so many little Easter eggs along like the edge of the painting, and you can go into depth about every single instance and every single just little part and what this means. So it's just a really big influential art piece. When people think of art a lot, this is one of the most famous ones. And the thing is it's probably the biggest painting and just largest scale painting that is so popular. This was built on top of chapel ceiling, so it's just kind of something to keep in mind that not only is it something that was so beautiful and so intricate, but he ended up doing it just really, really big and large scale. So it's just really cool, and it's a really cool piece of art. My personal favorite, one of my favorite parts of art has got to be photography. And honestly, photography, I love photography. It is one of the most graphic, horrific, and also beautiful pieces. And so it's a lot different than I think some of the other forms of 2D art, because with photography, it can get so dark and it can also be so beautiful. You can see kind of the contrast, and what I end up talking about here is on one side you've got nature, which is so beautiful, God's creation, everything like that, and on the other side you've got just like the sins and the horrifying things of man. One of the big things that I like to talk about is World War II, and some of the World War II photos from concentration camps, from war, from famine, just all sorts of stuff. Not even World War II in general, but the photography is just absolutely real. I'm pretty sure that this one, the bottom right picture I have is called Gateway to Hell, and I believe that was whenever soldiers were all fighting for their death in the water right there, and that was just absolutely brutal. And a lot of these World War II photos, although they're really interesting, are just horrific and terrible, and you feel more because you know that this stuff is real and that this actually happened. This is just what it actually ended up looking like. So photography is one of the coolest things. It's absolutely cool. You can see some really cool like nature pieces with beautiful nature, beautiful skies, beautiful mountains, stuff like that. And in here we've got a picture of just kind of the water and the trees and just how beautiful it actually ends up looking there with all the peak cliffs and stuff. So that's really cool. But photography is definitely really interesting and one of the most diverse pieces of the 2D art. Now for my activity, this is what I actually ended up wanting to do. Is I thought that it would be really fun to kind of end up, I don't know if you're going to be doing the activity or how it's going to work, but one thing I thought would be cool is that you would end up taking a picture of something that you love right now and try to resonate it with something in the presentation. So with the photography, you have two sides. Is it a beautiful thing? Is it more of a just how it is type of thing? Or I like to do baseball. And so I ended up talking about this picture that I ended up taking while we were in Florida during the spring break trip with the college. And it was actually really ended up being cool. And I just thought it was a really cool picture of a baseball field. I know that it's just a baseball field, but I like this picture and I thought it was actually pretty cool with the sunset. And it was really cool in person as the sun was rising. I just thought it was kind of one of those perfect timing pics. And I had a lot of fun on this trip. And it just... the way that I see it is definitely the beautiful side of nature, and kind of just I see just happiness with this photo because it's just me playing on a baseball field. And so I really like this picture, and that's what I figured I would do for my activity, is kind of talk about something that I love right now and something that makes me happy. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and see ya.